started talking about something from October. Like a couple times back to it. Gotta just throw it on.
At least my clock says 1 minute, but the computer says it's 5 o'clock, Chelsea, so
That's also kind of a pain. Yeah.
yes, we can get ready to go. Okay, we're gonna call the work session to order for January 12th. Our agenda includes one item, which is discussion of the Four Seasons Festival, and Chelsea is going to lead us in this discussion. So, floor is yours.
Thank you. Happy 2026, our first meeting of the new year. Actually, Jason Tran and I are going to tag team this discussion tonight. I'm going to start, and then he is going to take over. These are the things I'm wanting to discuss tonight. I would like to kind of just give you all an overview of why we're talking about the Four Seasons Festival. Go Polk City let the city know back in the fall of 2025 that they did not want to continue to run the Four Seasons Festival, which is why we're having this discussion today. I want to provide you with some conversation on 4 different topics today for the work session. The first thing I'm going to go over is the budget for the Four Seasons Festival. It is available in Dropbox. You all should have had that ahead of time, and I also have it projected on the screen. We'll start with that. I want to hand it over to Jason Tran to then talk about discussion on who is doing what for all events throughout the city of Polk City. He's then going to lead us to just show some comparison of how other special events are run in our neighboring communities. That document was also available in Dropbox prior to today's meeting. And then I am going to go over our 2 proposed recommendations and options for what the festival is structured like in 2026 and beyond. So basically how we've gotten here today is a number of staff members have been meeting for the last month or so to talk about the Four Seasons Festival. That's consisted of myself, Jason Tran, Allison, his Parks and Rec coordinator, and then Susan Lawton, our city clerk. Susan let me know a few weeks ago that she had event planning experience and she would like to provide some insight onto the Four Seasons Festival. So we've been meeting for the last month, and that is where we've come up with the recommendations for how we move forward with the Four Seasons Festival today. Let's start with the budget for the Four Seasons Festival. I think this is a commonly asked thing. How much money does it cost to run the Four Seasons Festival? So in front of you tonight is a budget. The 2025 column is actual revenue in the top, expenses in the bottom. I think you're all aware of the structure Go Polk City has run with the Four Seasons Festival. It's been a 2-day event. The festival kind of kicks off on Friday afternoon with a golf tournament, and there are activities on the square Friday evening with live music, beer garden, and then Saturday the event transitions into a run. In the morning, there's a number of other community events involved. And then there's a parade late morning. The parade kind of transitions into people coming up to the square and participating in fun activities, lots of kid activities. And then there's typically live music, beer garden in the afternoon and evening of Saturday. So that is, I would call, the traditional Four Seasons Festival. So as you can see, actual revenue for the 2025 Four Seasons Festival, they brought in about $55,000 in revenue. I'm going to break this down. So vendor fees, $35. This is something that they've continued to increase over the years, is bringing like a market to the Four Seasons Festival, and people that want to participate and sell items at the market pay vendor fees. The next line item is miscellaneous t-shirts. I think Go Polk City tried to do something a little different this year where they were selling themed t-shirts, and that is revenue from the t-shirts. That could also be some revenue from the t-shirts from the run as well. I noticed that some of that revenue got put into that line item. There is $100 revenue for the Bill Riley Talent Show. And then one of the big revenue makers was sponsorships for the Four Seasons Festival. In 2025, that brought in $19,000. There are entry fees required to participate in the parade. That's $727. The race. So Go Polk City has traditionally put on a run. It is a 5K, 8K, and 10K. That event makes good revenue. We're looking at about just shy of $6,000 in revenue from 2025. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit because there's a glare so I can read here. And then skipping to the beer garden, obviously the beer garden makes a substantial amount of money. That's $19,000 in revenue. And then the golf outing also produces some revenue for the event. So does anybody have any questions on the 2025 revenue before I jump into expenditures?
So, Chelsea, on the run, does all the revenue from that activity go into the overall revenue account for the, I thought that the Friends of the Parks actually took a lot of that revenue from, considered as donations to the Friends of the Parks.
I do not think the Friends of the Parks has ever been involved with the Four Seasons run. Can you confirm that?
That is correct. They
Okay.
did their Earth Day.
That's what I'm
Okay.
confused with. Thank you for clarifying, Jason.
Any other questions? Okay, let's talk about expenses of the Four Seasons Festival. So the Bill O'Reilly Talent Show cost about just shy of $1,100 to bring in. We've done quite a bit of research on the Bill O'Reilly Talent Show, and it costs very little money to get Bill O'Reilly to come to Polk City, as you can see with the expenses, but that event in itself, it brings a lot of people to the community. Kid games and entertainment, just shy of $9,000. This would be all of the inflatables involved with the kids' entertainment. If there is a face painter involved in the event, or I think they've had balloon artists at the event before, this would also be an expense in that line item. Band and music, $5,500. Sound and stage, $5,260. Meals, meetings, I think this is more of a miscellaneous expense for $31. Miscellaneous, $455. Marketing and advertising, they spent around $650 on the event. Portable toilets, $2,000. Sanitation, this would be for roll-off for garbage, $436. Festival shirts, this would be for volunteer t-shirts. It would also be for those shirts that Go Polk City purchased in 2025 that were available for purchase. And again, I did notice that some of the expenses for the race actually came out of this line item as well. So racing t-shirts for the 5K, 8K, 10K. Go Polk City has gotten an additional insurance package or insurance coverage for the event. This would be required for the beer garden as well as the inflatables. Rentals, this would be tables, chairs, and tents, just shy of $10,000. Last year, Go Polk City hired private security. They used Permar Security. The cost for bringing them in for the 2 days was just around $4,200. The expenses for the parade, just shy of $15,000. The run expenses, again, I think some of the t-shirts got put into that t-shirt category. I don't think this is a true line item for expenses for the run, but this budget shows $600. The cost of the beer garden is just shy of $10,000. The golf outing cost to rent TCI and then meals provided from TCI is $7,700. In years past, I don't know that the golf outing has actually made money, but if you look at 2025, the golf outing did make money. They made about $1,800. And then online fees, just shy of $900. So in 2025, I'm going to say the Four Seasons Festival cost $62,000. And Go Polk City was able to offset those expenses with $55,000 in revenue. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Without spilling over to the greater question on how to run it. I would just point out that this year, or this past year, would look a lot different than a lot of the years where the event was volunteer run. Some different, I mean, they spent a lot of money paying for things that volunteers had either staffed or ran in the past. And I think, I'm not aware of any of the years where it was volunteer run where it was a loss to this tune. So anyway, I think it's a relevant thing to go through. I just don't think it's an accurate picture of the whatever 18-year history we have of the festival. So.
Okay, I'm gonna go over real briefly. We've put together a proposed budget or an estimated budget. A lot of this would assume that the city is involved some way. We're either running the event, or we can talk about the committee model here in a second. We do have a concern about reduced sponsorship if the city government runs the event. And I am telling you that based off of past experience, where you get interested people in making donations and then they don't want to write a check to the city. This is a lot of the reason why we have all the nonprofits in Polk City: Friends of the Library, Parks, Police, Fire. People are more comfortable making a contribution to those nonprofits than they are writing the city government a check. So I will preface by saying that I think that if the city runs the event, we might have less revenue to offset the expenses to run the event. So kids, games, and entertainment, we put $2,500 in revenue there. Something that we could look at changing if the city runs the event is we start charging for wristbands for participation in the kids' events. So we've plugged in a very conservative number there, that would be some revenue that we could generate for the activities. Online fees, we would just pass that along to people registering online for the activities, but that would generate about $750. Other sponsors, so we put in, again, a conservative estimate. We think that we could get $10,000 in sponsorships for the festival. That is not close to the $19,000 that the chamber was able to secure. The parade, we plugged $500 in, again, pretty conservative estimate. For the run, I think if the city is going to take over the Four Seasons Festival, since the run does generate some decent revenue, I think we would want to continue to do the run to reduce the expenditure side of putting on the two-day event. So I have put revenue in here for the run. And then I also plugged in $5,000 in grants. I think if the event is hosted by the city could look into 2 grant opportunities. One is new through Bravo. They just opened this up in early January. It is for special city events. We would be eligible to apply. And then also I think that we could apply through Polk County Supervisors Fund for some grant funding. On the expense side, I think we're trying to be realistic, but knowing that we're in the middle of a budget year, we don't have the festival planned for. Our goal was to talk about how can we keep the festival as similar as possible, but maybe enhance some things that are lower cost. So we've put together just a pretty conservative budget, I would say, for the expenses too. Cost of the Bill O'Reilly Talent Show, we have $1,100 plugged in here. The kids' games and entertainment, we have $10,000 here. Jason Tran provided us with invoices for what he expenses for the Fall Fest, very similar. That's where we came up with that number. Band stage, we put $5,000 in here, but we increased the cost of the sound and stage. Our estimates really do not reflect renting a stage. Last year, Go Polk City was able to use a stage that they owned and had stored off-site. So that actually saved Go Polk City quite a bit of money. We met with Stacy Allen last week, and she did say that if we were interested in using that stage, that it would be available to us if we were interested. Marketing advertising, $250. Sorry, I'm a little bit off here. Miscellaneous was $250, marketing and advertising, $1,500.
Was that the stage that they had used in years past?
It's the stage that someone had stored in
Yeah.
their barn or something, and they hadn't used it for a few years, and last year they brought it back.
But they had used it previously for the festival?
Yes,
Well, they rent.
years ago.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
the last few years, they've always rented one. Except for last year, they brought back this one from this family.
I would challenge who actually owns that stage, because that stage was built and donated to the festival when it was under the Development Corporation. So if it's anybody's properties, it's as much the city's as it is Polk City's because of how things evolved. Now, that's neither here nor there right now, but that was built specifically for the festival and paid for by not what is now Polk City or whatever they're calling themselves.
It sounds like they are looking to dispose of it, so I don't know that they'd charge us if we are interested in it, but the problem is gonna be where we keep it stored, so.
Not easy to put together either, so.
I think that was one of the issues too, was that it was not easy to put together.
Okay,
So the costs on here reflect what it would cost us to rent a stage outright from,
no, we have not included that in the expenses. I think we would need to look at increasing that line item if we need to rent a stage.
okay, so the $7,500 that we've got line items there gets us what?
That is like the cost to bring Iowa Sound in and do all of the sound
Okay.
for the event. Yeah, good question. Sanitation, 2,000. Sorry, I keep getting off. It's hard to read, such small print up here. $2,000 for portable toilets, $500 for sanitation. We plugged $500 in for festival t-shirts. We did reduce this line item. We think that we could just purchase festival t-shirts for the volunteers. $1,000 for rentals, I keep getting off. $1,000 for an insurance policy, $9,500 for rentals. This would be tables, chairs, and tents. Supplies, equipment, printing, $250. We put that the cost of the run would be closer to $100. And then, is that right? No, the cost of the run would be $2,500. I think I better just quit going over the line items. You guys can all read it, right? Okay. Bare bones budget, $42,000 to run the festival. Please note that I don't have a dollar amount for security. That is something that we would like to further have conversations with the police department about, if they would be able to assist us. In 2025, it was a staffing issue because the event got moved from July to June, and we had a number of officers that had requested that time off. So we do think that that is something that obviously the city pays for police officers' wages and benefits. Comes out of the police budget. We probably should reflect it in the true cost of the festival, however. So just putting together a very rough budget of the information we have and what we know, we think it would cost about $42,000 to put on the Four Seasons Festival, but we do think that we could offset those expenses by about $22,000 in revenue.
So one thing that the chamber used to pay for was barricades, and the city continued to buy barricades. Are we in the position to have enough of those now owned by the city, for enough barricades of our own?
Yes, I think barricades we own and could use. The message boards that we put up for traffic detouring, that is costly, and that is something that we would have to account for as well, which I believe is in this budget.
So, you wanna go?
Is there a technical reason why we could not take on the beer garden as a revenue generating item?
We could. I think based off of what we're kind of going into in 2026, I wouldn't recommend it. You're putting a lot of liability and risk on the city. So you are correct. Thanks for bringing that up. I did take expenses out of the beer garden, and if you read the memo, there were a couple of reasons why, and there's a couple of options that you could consider for the beer garden.
So just real quick on the expenses, I want some clarification if we can. So you say the minimum here is 42. Realistically, it's 46 plus because we're unsure about security, right?
Yes,
So it's 46 plus, meaning we don't know if we have a stage that we could use or if we're gonna have to rent one. So that 46 could be, I don't know what a stage rental is.
it could be more.
Yeah, so I'll say 50, right? So let's say the bottom line or the minimum is $50,000 on expenses. We're not even talking about staff, with the exception of security, right? I'm not talking about man hours. I wanted to go back to Rob's comment about expense and how expenses have bloomed up over the past several years. I understand man hours and people time. If it's free or if we have to pay for it, it's one thing, but we're just talking raw expensive here, right? Is close to $50,000.
We feel good about the budget, like we've put quite a bit of effort and research into what the numbers are up there, but we do still have a couple of asterisks, and security and the stage is one of them.
And that's the current iteration of the festival as it was in 2025, meaning a 2-day event, activities happening Friday, costs happening, and then everything. So if we continue to move forward, that number each year is going to continue to go up just on expenses, more than likely.
Yes,
If it's city run every year.
Well, no, we're not even talking about, I mean, these are hard expensive, how are these not hard expenses?
A lot of these things have been, like, the band is fluid, the sound.
That's why I would like to talk about, before we move on to anything else, make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about expenses, right? Because if it's run by a volunteer group or ran by the city, those expenses are still gonna happen. We're still gonna have to pay for a band, we're still gonna have to pay for, inflatables, all these other line items, we're still gonna have to pay for, correct? Or am I wrong?
No,
You're correct.
again, I think you're really talking apples and oranges from what a budget would look like for a volunteer-run organization versus a city-run, because some of these are hard costs, some of them are not. Marketing is not a hard cost. I think volunteers have done a lot of the marketing more to a better outcome. And then, as Chelsea mentioned, the sponsorship angle is definitely apples and oranges to what
Yeah, and
we'll
I'm
get to
talking
offset.
about not revenue, I'm talking about expenses, right? So, I mean, we still have to have $2,000 for portable toilets. I mean, I would agree with you, right? That's why I'd like to understand what things would be flexible and would impact that, and how much can it move the needle between, because then that's gonna go into my decision of, hey, should we allow the staff to do it, or should we focus on having a volunteer community run it? I just don't see where there's a lot of wiggle room there, meaning if a volunteer community did a lot of this.
One of the primary assets, in my opinion, of a volunteer event is what are the events or a volunteer festival is what are the specific events that the community wants to have. There's a much greater level of insight into with community people running what the community would want to have. So some of these things will change if you change some of the events. There's been a number of years where you've had the things on the square have changed dramatically. Other than a beer garden and a parade, everything else has been pretty fungible. So I think given where we are, 2026 is going to be relatively bare bones because of the timeline that we have, regardless of who's running it. And making a decision on what that structure looks like can determine which of these costs we need to have, because they're going to determine the schedule of events for those 2 days.
Okay, I'll hold my additional thoughts because looking at the time here, but I wanted to make sure, at least from my perspective, these are our expenses, which are fairly static no matter who runs the operation.
Yeah, and I wanted to give you all a good idea of showing you how much I think the city's gonna have to contribute to break even. So I wanted to try to prepare a budget that I thought was realistic. I'm gonna turn it over to Jason. He has quite a bit that he wants to talk about on tonight, so.
Can you bring up that next
Yep,
slide?
yeah. Yeah, you want this one?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
All right, good evening. Yeah, I wanted to kind of touch base on what we're expecting 2026 to look like compared to 2025 with the recent decisions that the previous Polk City, now Polk City Area Chamber of Commerce have decided to do. Really looked to get away from large-scale projects. So looking through here now, some of it would likely change, some may not. At the moment, the Polk City Chamber has shown interest in continuing their Thursday night farmers markets. The summer kickoff, kind of original thing, is done by the Police Association, will continue to be done by the Police Association. Movies and yoga in the park are handled by the Parks and Rec Department and will continue to be so. The Final Fridays music series is done by the newly formed Arts and Culture Committee. They've already submitted 3 dates for 2026. Obviously, the next one up there, the Four Seasons Festival, used to be Polk City. That's why we're here tonight to talk about it. The Polk City Classic, like Chelsea said, has always kind of, no pun intended, teed off into the weekend for the festival. And they've shown interest in maintaining that as well. The big changes will probably be Fall Fest and Light Up Polk City. In years past, those have been collaborations between the Parks and Rec Department and Polk City. And the Parks and Rec Department is fully prepared to take those on in their entirety. Something else I wanted to mention too, not necessarily 2026 based on what we think construction will look like, but when the Polk City Junction Trail is complete, we do see opportunities for more special events in and around the square, be they be runs or bike rides. So we definitely do see that on the horizon, and more likely than not being a product of the Parks and Recreation Department. Does anyone have any questions about what we're thinking for 26 there?
I guess one comment I do have, Jason, is I know we can't see into the future. I have a little uneasiness about the chamber's ability to continue to handle the farmers market in light of everything that's transpired. I guess I would just challenge staff to kind of have an idea or a contingency how we would handle that if they're unable to fill that obligation, right?
Sure.
Obviously, they really changed their focus. I applaud them for wanting to be able to take this on, but maybe with the lack of funding coming from the city and their change in focus, maybe this might be too much. I know our community really likes the farmers market. I enjoy it, and I'd hate to see that go. I would rather have something in place if it's unlikely that it happens and able to respond to it rather than get caught off guard. I guess that's just my thought there.
Understood. Anything, Nick?
I largely agree with Jeff. It sounds like they want to try it at least for another year and see where they get. So I think that this might be a 2027 type of decision as far as the farmer's market goes.
Perfect, yep, all right. So now- Yeah, so when we started talking about, all things Four Seasons, did kind of an analysis of our neighbors in every direction, small communities, big communities, like-sized communities, just to get a pulse on what their community festival is, who runs it. Now, there's no prescription here saying that one model works here and it's going to work everywhere. In fact, in doing some research, it's quite the opposite. As you might imagine, every community is unique. And so every festival or celebration is also going to be unique. What I really took away from this is I had a sample size of 24 communities. Of those 24, 10, their festival is ran by their chamber, which we just had. 8 are volunteer-led. 3 are city-led, and 3 are combinations. The most common combination is chamber and city. I wanted to focus on the volunteer ones on here. So I might be biased because I used to work for the city of Urbandale, but the Urbandale 4th of July celebration is a fantastically run, and it's run by a volunteer board. And honestly, when I was introduced to the 4th of July board chair, it was kind of like meeting royalty or, kind of thing. But what I found here, the most successful volunteer ones are, they do have history. They are the ones that have been around for quite a while. And oftentimes they are very structured. A lot of them have their own tax status, their own bank accounts. Some of them even have elections where you're getting your chair for 3 years. Very similar to what you guys are doing up here. That way it really avoids the catastrophic everybody leaves at once. This way they have somebody that's waiting in the wings to be vice chair and then chair. So there's just that constant moving forward that comes with a volunteer-led thing. Just because. That is a risk that you do run if, you're changing volunteers year to year. You're kind of having to train year after year after year. So, having that kind of group in place, it does really require a lot of structure, a lot of, like I said, terms, and just being legitimate's not the right word, but, a recognized group. That might be the best way to put it. There are some things that, like a beer garden per se, after our little research, not just anybody can go get a temporary license. You do have to have a tax identification with the state of Iowa to be able to get a state of Iowa liquor license. I thought this was really interesting. Of two of the city-led ones, Clive and Granger, couldn't be more different, but going in very different directions. So Granger Days right now is ran by the city of Granger. They are actually transitioning to a nonprofit group to take it going forward, ran by volunteers. The Clive Festival, which used to kind of have the following of the Urbandale 4th of July celebration for decades, the city was asked to take it over in 2021 as getting reliable volunteers was falling on deaf ears. So what I'm trying to tell you is we're going to take a guess, more or less. We might think we have the answer. We might not. 24 festivals up there, all of them are ran a little bit differently. Some of the others that have long-standing volunteer groups, the Norwalk, Summerfest, and Bondurant, that one is one of the combinations. The city of Bondurant does do just enough to be kind of a co-sponsor, but by and large, it's ran by the Bondurant Men's Club, and it seems like they don't want to give it up anytime soon. So that would be an example of one that really has staying power. The Slater Community Club. Oh, what else? Obviously one of the most successful ones would be the Pella Historical Society with Tulip Time, but, that's its own beast kind of thing. I don't think that one's going to change anytime soon. But, kind of coming from here, there are positives and there are negatives to every way that you can organize a festival. It's really what we think Polk City would go for. What do we think our citizens would do in terms of volunteering? Would we have problem filling that multi-year, be it board or a director at large, then vice chair, chair, just so there's always, you know, the leadership that's learning and moving that thing forward. You know, or if you have, and you know, there's definitely need for both the volunteers that are multi-year or the folks that just like to come down and, you know, sell tickets and wristbands. You know, you're going to need either of those, but you know, it's just what does this council think would Polk City citizens do, you know, if we did go the volunteer route? Just something to think about. Also too, Rob alluded to it earlier, you know, either way, you know, the festival is 6 months away, you know, and you would like planning to have already started at this point. So I think whichever route we go with, 2026 could look a little different, you know, and then either way, I think you gear up for a grand unveiling in 2027 of, you know, bringing it back and having it just be the new norm of, you know, just gorgeous and everybody wants to come. So does anyone have any questions on, you know, any of these festivals? Some I know more about, but I'd be happy to kind of tell you what I know about each.
Yeah, real quick, I think you kind of just hit on one of my main focus areas as I'm thinking about this. You brought up that many of these committees are very structured, have been around for quite a long time, and we have 6 months. And do we have a committee in town that's ready to take this on, chomping at the bit, ready to go?
I guess to add on to that, if I can, one of my questions was with these other cities, do those groups, are they comprised of existing nonprofits like cross-member, pollination, so to speak?
Sure.
Rather than starting from scratch?
No, so none of them are true. How do I say this? They are an eclectic group, often representation from different groups. You know, most of them do have some sort of city representation, but then you'll probably have, if there's a women's group, a men's group, Kiwanis, you know, Legion, Lions, kind of all of those things, or just, you know, prominent business people or just good-to-do citizens. So yeah, it's not like any of these are run exclusively by Kiwanis, but I would imagine any town that has Kiwanis would probably have some Kiwanis representation on these. But yeah, so to your point, Jeff, they are newly grown committees comprised of several groups, businesses, staff.
Yeah, Jason, I think you've given us the right answer with how you talked about Urbandale over time to build towards that parent committee that engages subcommittees. Sometimes it's Friends of the Park, sometimes it's the chamber, sometimes it's other committees. And if we can build towards that, the big question is, like was alluded to, in 6 months, how much can be done in 2026? But the right answer to me, and it was that before presenting all this information, is a committee-led event if they can be equipped to make decisions and empowered to facilitate those instead of being cut off at the knees, like I said, because this existed 6 or 7 years ago until the Development Corporation and the Chamber merged and then methodically went about dismantling that. There was a group set up to do this, and I don't mean to rehash all of the things that happened that led us to this point, but here we are nonetheless. And if the city is committed to building an organization over time and attaching some training wheels, I can't imagine a version of this year or 10 years from now that you and your department aren't involved with to some degree. I'm very concerned about doing it any longer than we have to for the cost. And then the Fall Festival and some of these other things that you're taking on are a lot anyway. It's very clear to me, and having been involved in the past and disappointed to see the digression over the past couple of years, it's not surprising, but I think needs to be a recognition of what's happened and a change and empowerment going forward.
So if our idea is to go forward with a volunteer committee, do we have buy-in? Have we already talked to groups like Friends of the Park, like Kiwanis? To what extent can we lean on the Parks and Recreation, the board, the committee? for help. I know that they had been chomping at the bit for several years to have something really functional that they can contribute. And they might be a good place to look for people willing to coordinate.
I think there's definitely the desire of the Parks Commission to assist with something like this. I can't speak for them whether they would want to be that body. As for existing groups in town, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the Friends of the Parks. I don't think that there's a desire to take on something to this magnitude as the sole host. You know, with Kiwanis, I can't speak for them either. This is a huge undertaking, you know, so again, this is just my opinion. I don't know that there's a group equipped to do it as is in town. I think it needs to be a start from scratch, build something that has city representation, business representation, volunteers, if you went that route. You know, and something else just to a comment that Rob made, and I'm certainly not trying to play devil's advocate to his comment. When I said that, you know, each of these is just unique, every community is unique, you know. Urbandale has the staying power, you know, whereas Clive was very similar for decades, and then finally a lot of that old guard.
5 after 5, is it that group?
It could have been, you know, I talked with my colleague in Clive today, and he just said that a lot of those folks, you know, got to 60, 70, and, you know, I'll take the brunt, I guess, for my generation, but those that are in their late 30s and 40 now, they never picked up the pieces. So I don't know what Urbandale looks like, you know, going 5, 10 years. Will it be a repeat of Clive? I have no idea, but I think there has absolutely been a difference of volunteerism as we've went on. But again, every community is different. So until you ask, you don't know.
Kind of sounds like to me that based on time being the factor, we have to make a tactical decision, right? A short term and a strategic long term. It just kind of feels like, I don't know if, looking at everybody else here, if we could pull together quickly a committee and put that much, you know, accountability on them and everybody in a short amount of time, that's a big ask. But start building up to 27 as being, let's lay the foundation and enable people to, you know, Rob's words here. Maybe it's a combination of we look to staff being able to take it on in 26 and 27. We lay the foundation for, and I like that idea. I really like that idea of having this being ran by a committee and enabling people and getting feedback from our city. Those are just my thoughts.
Holding off on a year to do it as a volunteer committee would give us time to set up some sort of nonprofit to get those tax identification numbers, to get checking accounts.
Yeah, I don't want to
those
set
things
anybody
set
up to fail. That's what I'm scared of, is throwing someone into a hot seat. Again, I don't know what I don't know, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like a lot of work to throw onto a volunteer base to do. And
Yeah, something else that I want to point out too with these festivals up here, again, all very different, but some of them did a fantastic job of parlaying what groups already are doing. You know, and it just got me thinking, you know, this new Arts and Culture Committee here in town, you know, they've been getting some progress with their music, their Final Fridays. You know, just spitballing here, you know, what if the Friday of the festival, in whoever's in charge, you know, you've got a group that already wants to provide an activity on the square with music. You know, you've got other groups out there that could, you know, add to this with possibly helping the committee out on the other side to not overburden anybody. So, you know, it takes all types. So that just got me thinking that there are groups out there that already have things that we could incorporate into this, kind of like we do with Fall Fest. You know, Fenders, this is obviously a public-private example, but, you know, they do their Fenders Fest next door while we do our Fall Fest. Most people that come to the square look at it as just one large festival, but they don't realize we really did split it down the middle. I'm worried about the family component, they're worried about the adult fun component. And when you do it together well, it looks like one event. So that is something that we could explore as well.
So would you be willing, whether it's your group or the Parks Commission, to sort of facilitate, because I think for just 2026, again, if we're building towards a community consistent thing year over year, for 2026, if we can assemble the groups that are of that vein, find out what they would be willing to do, because I know some of the more complicated ones, just from, the discussions, Chief, we've had in the past, if there's not a run, or if there's not a parade, and I think a parade is a non-starter, but I'm just using it as an example, that looks a lot different for you. So if we can narrow down the things that, and there have been years where we didn't have a run before and some of these things. So if there are things that aren't practical in the near term, we can make the bridge to get what is needed. Now, I will say, as much as I appreciate the idea, if you charge for wristbands for the inflatables, we'll have a riot out there. I can promise you that.
So just real quick, Rob, that sounds like another conversation, because I thought we were gonna say 26 is gonna look identical to 25. If we're gonna start having the conversations of, let's change, did I hear you correctly about let's change 26 where we might not have a run or we might not do this activity?
No, I was using those as examples, but I think the 2026 is not gonna look like 2025 because the chamber's not, Go Polk City or whatever they aren't running it. We need to decide what we're building towards.
I think we should probably plan on budgeting right now to look like 26 as close as possible, and let the committee, let Jason, let whoever ends up steering this thing decide what, if anything, needs to go out in the sake of expedience to actually get the thing done.
Okay, so we are past our hard stop, 5:45 time. We need to give these guys some direction as to what we're going to do in 2026. So
I guess just a final question. Jason, do you have the bandwidth to captain a group of volunteers coming in to really do this for this year?
I have my worries on that.
I think, if I may real quick, I think it'd be a call of action. If we're gonna do something committee-based, then all liaisons, all departments, everybody will need to essentially do a call of action for volunteers and setting the stage for, it's not gonna be the same as last year. Here's why. We're ramping to get it to 27. If we set the expectation correctly and aim as high as we can, but know that, we can only knock it out of the park.
I mean, my only concern is we didn't go through the options and details here, so there was a lot of content we didn't get to. So I'm not comfortable making a recommendation now. I feel like follow-up conversation is needed from my perspective. So is there more information that needs to be provided and discussed before we give you guidance?
We really just, we just have the discussions, 2 options for you that were put in the memo. We tried to narrow it down as best as we can. Option A is that the city staff runs the event. I think that the consideration needs to be made that if the city staff is gonna take on the event, that is a part-time job in itself. We would like the council to consider allowing the addition of a staff member. That could be a full-time staff member with other responsibilities, or it could be a part-time staff member. I think if the city staff runs the event, we'd like to look at other avenues for the beer garden. We'd like either someone else to host the beer garden. We'd like to allow for the businesses to expand to provide alcohol to the event. But I think that we've got some concerns about, the city running the beer garden. I think we'd allow the golf outing to be hosted by the chamber. They seem to want to continue to do that. They're good at it. So we would allow that component to stay the same, or we'd suggest that component stays the same. And then I think that if the city staff's going to run the event, we take on the run. I think that we will need to rely heavily on volunteers that have established that run. But I think that would be something that we could host and take on. Option B is the committee-led event hosted by the committee. My suggestions, recommendations would be that if it's a committee, it needs to be established. They need to have a business ID with a bank account. I think that needs to happen like today. Otherwise, this thing is not going to get off the ground for June 2026. Maybe there could be some city representation on the committee. That would be a suggestion I would have, especially if the city wants to contribute to the festival financially and the financials are run through a different entity. The city could provide some sort of sponsorship opportunity, but I think you want to have city officials on that committee if you're going to do that. The beer garden decision really could be made by the committee. I listed those examples in there. Again, golf outing to be hosted by the chamber. They've said that that's something they want to continue to do. Why not allow them to do it? And then I think the road run, that decision could be made by the committee or it could be hosted by the committee. We've tried to narrow it down to 2 options for you that we think this would work. Kind of what I'm hearing is that the committee is going to be difficult for 2026. Just knowing that you're less than 6 months away. Just a reminder, the festival last year got moved from the 3rd weekend in July to the last weekend in June. So if we're going to keep that date, the clock has already started ticking and you're already shy of 6 months to start planning this
I
event.
almost feel like you have to, because you can't switch one year to a month earlier and then switch it back.
I don't know. I mean, it was after at this point last year when they made that switch and I didn't get a lot of positive feedback. I think the numbers bear that out. I think reverting, 1, it buys you time, and 2,
Does buy you
it's a known date. I mean, it's not perfect. It's July, there's stuff going
Right.
on. I get that, but
Like, I would feel like option B is preferable, but I also don't feel like it's an option.
For 26.
If we can't say who those people would be, that's just a big question mark, which it will take months to figure that out, potentially.
I don't disagree with that, but if the city-led event that it has a question mark with the beer garden and some of the other events is equally as problematic,
You can find somebody to sell beer.
Well, when we had our original conversation with the chamber about this event, when they let us know they weren't going to do it anymore, we talked about the local businesses, vendors, papas, the pub, doing the food and the beer both, and handling it that way. I know there was some positive reception to that from one of the people who was in the room. Others weren't in the room. So that's an option as well. Didn't the chamber say that they would still be interested in doing the beer garden?
Yes, they said they would maybe have interest in doing it for 1 night. They didn't think they could get enough volunteers for 2 nights.
See, I would like to have more conversation and not rush this final answer. I know that's not what you want, but I think we need to make some decisions because personally, I'm in favor, instead of having a beer garden, enabling our local businesses to be able to make some revenue off of those. We also need to have these discussions about, Jason said he's gonna need help. We need to probably talk through that. Can we all get that figured out in the next 9 minutes, 8 minutes? I doubt, right?
I think you've given great feedback today, though, and I think that we can further narrow a recommendation for the next conversation based off of what I've heard from everybody today. I'm hearing that we want to turn this into a committee-led event, but the question is, are we ready to do this in 2026? So maybe what our recommendation is that the city staff works to get us through 26 and we hit it hard July of this year to start the committee-led for 27.
I think if possible, building something of a hybrid where we bring in some
Yeah.
dedicated people this year to take some of that load off Jason.
Okay.
There are certain
Again,
amount of
it's-
things that
it's-
you're gonna have to get done just to get done, but you
Yes.
should be able to begin the framework of a committee this year as well. So I agree with the hybrid, whatever we wanna call it. I'm also fine with talking about this further, because I think we got the tail end rushed a little bit.
Yeah.
But we do need a point of contact. We need, to kind of start those conversations up for people that may be interested, like right now, that have thought about it, they want to volunteer. Why not have something out there that allows them to understand that we are in need? And if they have special skills specifically to help with something.
So my expectation is not that staff kills themselves. So if we need to onboard temporary staff or something, or if we're not getting the committee, the volunteers, we need to figure something out.
I think that if you're going to ask the city staff to do something substantial like this, we need to offset with additional staff, otherwise something else will give. So I think that is something very important, like, and maybe you're all okay with something else giving, but the Parks and Rec department is a two-person department. They maximize their time and provide a lot of programming for the community. So I would recommend and suggest that if the city staff is going to do the majority of the work in 26, that we add a staff member. It doesn't have to be a full-time person, based off of what I'm hearing, that this could be a short-term arrangement, but I do think we need additional help in the Parks and Rec department.
You come back, could you have some numbers, what that would look like? At least that's would help.
A temporary employee for something like that.
Okay.
I'm not sure this is a long-term need, especially if we're moving towards the committee.
So since we're running out of time, would the council be in favor of having a special meeting to continue this conversation? Is that what you think we need to do, Chelsea, or?
I think we need a good week to get to work on a new recommendation, and we'll come back to you when we're ready. If we could hold a special meeting, that's not off the table, but I don't know that we can find time next week to hold it. So it might have to wait till the January 26th meeting. But given the direction you've given me, I feel like with our current staff, we can start working to secure some of the things that need to be decided within the next couple of weeks. And then we can rediscuss on the 26th. Does that sound okay?
Sound okay, Nick?
I'm good with that.
James?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Nevada's festival is really Pizza Palooza. That's what it's called.
Yes.
Should we go? Let's go check it out.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and progress that way. Chelsea, Jason, thanks for the input on this.
Thank you.
And that was our only topic. So our other topic, number 2, is adjournment. So I'll ask for a motion in a second to adjourn.
Moved.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, same sign. We're adjourned until council meeting in just a few minutes.